You don't need anything except intention and a pen. Or not even a pen. Oh, I could never write in my books because I don't know what to write. I don't want to sound dumb. The things that I write in my books are the silliest things ever. The first page of this looks dreadful. If you want some inspiration, this is inspiration, but I literally, to read solely without interacting with the text ever, to me that wouldn't even really be reading at this point. Sat on the floor by my bookshelves. Here before me, I've got 24 books. And here, I've got all the different methods of analysing, annotating, ruining a novel you can imagine. And we're going to go through all of them. But perhaps it ain't a novel you want to annotate. Don't worry. We've got your non-fiction option, your poetry option, and your Shakespeare option. I think we are good to go. I love how everyone's annotation video starts off. I have been asked a million times to make this video, and finally, I'm here for you. No one has asked me to make this video. No one probably cares. I wanted to film a bookish video, but I'm in the middle of a massive reading slump, and I love annotation. So we're just gonna jump into it. And rather than starting with why I annotate, because no one cares about that, I'm gonna start with how to annotate, from the simplest to the most complex procedure. And then at the end, I'm gonna simply wrap up why exactly do I love annotation. Someone came. So you're scared of writing in your books, but you feel like you've got to annotate. You want to annotate. Don't worry, I've got you covered. I've got 2 methods in here, which are the same method, but this is kind of the most layman's, actually lazy man's annotation variety, which is, I've got 6 tabs in here. I was not meant to annotate this book. The Invisible Life of Ada LaRue is one of my favourite books, and there were, well, apparently 6 moments in here which felt too important and affected me too much that I went, wait, where are my tabs? I have got to annotate. Did nothing else, nothing has been written, nothing has been marked. But I will always know that these 6 moments mattered to me a lot when I read them. And if I hadn't put in these tabs there, wouldn't have never known. That is kind of the most simplest one. Just buy very simple tabs, literally 1 colour. I think this is the exact one. Wow, 3 years later, I still own it. And put it in a place which you want to mark down for later. But that is a better example of this. Inferno was a book that I read when I was very early in my annotating life, and I wanted to mark it down, but I love this book. I love this cover. I bought it from Amsterdam and it means a lot to me, like as a physical book. And I wanted to mark down things that I loved. So I annotated it. I know there are a lot of colours in here. I don't know if they mean anything. And that is kind of why I don't personally like this method. Because yes, I have marked down places that I found entertaining, important, funny, but I don't know what. I don't know what these colours mean. I don't know what these marks mean. But if you're really scared of writing in your books and you just want to mark things down, you can do this. But I don't personally think it is the best method unless you put some organisation behind that. For example, with here, because there's so few marks, I know exactly what I meant by those placings. But here, because I marked down everything that I found worth marking down, I had annotations on every 4th page. So my tip is, if you want to go with this method where you just put the tabs down and you don't want to write anything on the pages, is get some post-its. Smaller post-its do exist. I have them, I don't know where. And simply write down whatever it is that you found worth noting. And like I said, if you're marking few things down, just like if you personally know that you're only marking down the moments that you find the most impactful and the most important, then this method can work. And this is why I have to do a chaotic guide to annotation, because I am a lord of chaos and I completely forgot to introduce you to my annotation supplies. And it goes with the theme. Here is my annotation everything. It's not even my annotation everything, because here's more. You don't have to be organized to annotate. You don't need anything except intention and a pen, or not even a pen, a tab like we just went through. But now we're gonna go to the actual annotation methods in which you use a pen. A pen? A pen! But now we're gonna go through with the actual annotation methods, which are a bit more annotated and which are the ones I use. The simplest form of annotation, like I said, you only need a pen. You don't have to write anything down if you're scared of writing down your thoughts or you're just not interested. But let's say you have to do something for school and you just have to mark down certain passages. Nothing else is necessary, just underlining. How I like to do is that I underline if it's a bit more notable, and I put these brackets on the side if it's either a longer piece of text or it's less notable. Nothing else needed to be said. That is kind of the level 1. Let's call the previous level level 0, and this is level 1 of annotation. There's nothing else to say about that. I only use pens, but that's because I really don't like pencils. But again, if you don't want to use a pen, you can use a pencil. How you can kind of level it up a bit is marking down a star or an exclamation mark. That kind of can exist instead of a tab, and that's something I do sometimes. That works well, because then when you are going through it quickly, you can easily see it. Okay, we've got level 2, or I would say this is level 1.5. This is the same as the previous one, except even more important stuff is highlighted. I can't explain why sometimes I write in my books and sometimes I don't. That just happens. Some books are kinds of books which you want to interact more kind of on the page, and some things are more just books where you want to know things. I didn't go into Dune thinking I'm not gonna write anything down. That just kind of happened. Like I said, you can use highlighters to highlight kind of more important passages, or you can simply only highlight. The next level, which is level 2, is my favorite. I wouldn't say my favorite, it is my commonly used mode of annotation, at least recently, because it is simply the easiest. This is the easiest form of annotation, and it is basically just that, but with writing things down. So we're just using a pen, and we're doing nothing but, again, underlining and putting on brackets, and then we're writing things down. Now, I've even talked about this with my friends who are like, oh, I could never write in my books because I don't know what to write. I don't want to sound dumb. The things that I write in my books are the silliest things ever. And this is kind of the main thing. Your notes do not need to be coherent. They don't need to be intellectual. They are thoughts, and they can just be literally thoughts vomited on the page. I'm gonna browse through and I'm gonna read to you a random note. I have literally just written down, this book, man. This book, man. Is that an intellectual thought? No, and it doesn't need to be. That is kind of the main thing. Annotation is just about interacting with the book, and it's just, it can be literally just, oh yeah, okay, maybe you just wrote down XD, which I do a lot. But that's also kind of interacting with the book, because then when you're browsing through later, you can be like, ah, I found this funny. And you might think that's dumb, but there's kind of, I don't know where I'm going with this. You got the point. I think we all know how to pick up a pen and just underline things, bracket things, and write down. You can use I was going to say sharpener, it's not a sharpener. You can use, why am I lagging? What is it called? I'm having a massive lag at the minute. You can use the thing with which you make even lines. My mind doesn't work evenly, and I don't care about even lines. I have used that actually. We're gonna move on to it, but not yet, because then we've got Then we have got level 3, which is that, kind of, but with tabs. We've got tabs in usage. Let's imagine there being kind of the lowest of this level where you do exactly what I just did, but tab it with a single color. You don't have to do anything else except use a single color, but I can't find a book with which I've done that. I think I have, but I can't find one. So we're gonna move in the actual one. And these are 2 different methods. They are both color coordinated. This is doing exactly that, but instead of underlining it, I've just highlighted the book. If you like the idea of highlighting, if you think that looks pretty, you can highlight and then write down, or not write down, or you can underline it if you find that to be more pleasant. But I was just talking about, why can't I think of what the hell that word is? I'm gonna leave. My bus is leaving in 5 minutes. I was gonna miss Lord of the Rings. I was gonna miss the Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna buy. It doesn't look quite the same, but I think it will do. Hello. Wow, no, not that. Why is my voice? Hello. I'm back. Let's pretend that nothing happened. I went and saw the 2 towers. You don't care. Annotating. Where was I at? I think I was talking about level 3 annotation. So, tapping system is one thing that I see a lot of people go through, but I can't do that because I don't have a specific tapping system. I don't even have specific tabs I like. I like to switch it around. I kind of like it to match it with the book at times, and sometimes I just take what's at hand. It really depends on the book, and that's kind of what is my suggestion when it comes to tapping. It's just like thinking about what you want to know. Usually ones that I always have is either favorite / I love, and characters is one that I usually always have. That's just because I'm a character driven reader, so I like to take note on the characters, and I know a lot of people mark down like plot and like foreshadowing and stuff to do with kind of where the story is going. Like I said, I'm a character driven reader. I don't really read for plot, so I haven't got much for that, but we're gonna have that at my later plot point. But next we have got kind of 3.5, and I think the only one with which I've used this. Now let's say this is 4. This is another level. Let's call it 4. And that is how I annotated Wayward Son. And I've done this once or twice because I don't personally like this. I think it takes way too much effort. And that is matching my highlighting with the tapping. So here I have both underlined and highlighted, but the highlight is always on the same color as the tabs. So for example, if I've got a green tab, which means funny, the scene that I find funny, or like the part that I find funny, I have highlighted with green. But sometimes I might highlight something with green because it's funny, even though I'm not tabbing it green, so that when I go through it, it's not just an underline, but I understand why I've highlighted that. This is actually like a really cool idea if you want to be a bit more in-depth annotator, let's say. I am a lazy person. Like you've seen, my favorite style of annotation is literally just picking up a pen and underlining, bracketing. Those lines aren't straight and my thoughts are just like random, so not exactly for me. But if you want to level up your annotating, that's a cool idea, because when I look at Wayward Son, I actually really like to go through it because I really understand why I found that scene or like that part, that line noteworthy. I thought we had a few more levels here, but no, we're going to level 5. This is hardcore fantasy annotating, and I've only done this with my Sandersons, neither of which I have finished. I'm sorry, I'm rubbish. I'm gonna finish this at some point. I accidentally DNF'd it. No, it wasn't an accident. But what I'm doing here is I'm both tapping it extensively and using different colors to underline, but it's not to match with that. Like the first page of this looks dreadful. I have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 tapping colors and 5 underlining colors. If you want some inspiration, this is inspiration, but I literally, it brings me pain, but it brings me good pain because I really love this style of annotation for like very, very high fantasy, because I'm not going to reread this book before I go to the next book, but I might not remember everything either, so I can literally just look through, let's say, all the world tabs, and I can find what I was looking for. It's a slow process. This is a very much a slow process, but so are these books. So, and now I know what you might be thinking. How can you get more complex than this? Well, this is not technically a more complex in that sense. I think there are two examples of this, Into the Vampire and The Secret History. It's technically a lower level annotating style. I have just underlined and highlighted and tabbed and written. But why this is a next level annotating? Basically each and every page is completely overwritten by thoughts. I would not necessarily recommend this for a first read. I'm doing this with my first read of The Secret History, but that's also why it takes me forever to read Secret History. But with Interview with the Vampire, it's done with a reread, and I'm basically just writing down all my thoughts. This is me really analysing these scenes and chapters and everything. And that is kind of also what I would recommend kind of moving into my school annotating style. And I have got that separately. I got 5 books in here, 5 kind of books in which I've used the different types of annotating styles, and they're all done for studying purposes. Yes, we had very basic book choices. So first we have got Of Mice and Men, and technically here I've just underlined stuff and bracketed stuff, and I have written down stuff, but the only things I have actually written down are literary devices that I've noticed, or like themes. So I've written like foreshadowing, situational irony. This is also something that can only be done with a reread. So I've read Of Mice and Men, then we studied it in class, and then I've reread before I wrote the essay I was going to write, and that was actually what those tabs are. So I've only tabbed the places which I need for my essay, but you can only really do that with a short book like Of Mice and Men. That is not what I did with 1984. With 1984, what I did was I again underlined and bracketed. I didn't actually write anything on the pages, but I wrote this short synopsis, I suppose, of what happens in the chapter. So after I've done the chapter, it's kind of really short on this post-it note of what goes down. I'm not sure I recommend this, but I didn't actually end up writing an essay on this, so it didn't matter as much. I think if I would have, I probably would have reread at least the chapters I was going to write the essay on. I did also put in tabs, but I hate the way I put in the tabs, and I'm never going to do that again. Then we have got 2 examples which are just like quick ones, which are Perfume and Death of a Salesman. And with the Death of a Salesman, I didn't write down anything, nor did I use tabs. I literally just highlighted stuff, and if it was something more important, I literally just wrote it down in my notes. And that's one thing you can do, is if you can't write in the book or you don't want to write the book, just mark down the page you're writing about and the beginning of the line, and then write down your thought in like a notebook or Google Docs or something like that. With Perfume, I again just highlighted and put in tabs, and with a school book I knew before it what I was gonna look for from it, so I was really noting down anything about scent and the main character in this book. And then finally, this is for studying purposes, but this is not for English lit class. This is for studying about the writing, though you can use this for English lit as well. This is me writing down everything on every single page, and then at the end of the chapter I wrote down what I learned about writing from that chapter, kind of all the thoughts I've had. Again, this I only recommend if you really wanna study it extensively. Then one thing that I thought about is what I do with a reread, and I've got 2 examples. One is not so good one, because I started a reread of this and I read half of it on my reread, and then I didn't finish my reread. So we've got half of the book with my new tabs and half of the book with my old tabs. And this is one of my favorite annotated books. It's The Northern Lights, which I read, and then I borrowed it to my uncle who read it and also marked down some of his notes, and then I read it again, and everyone kind of annotated it with every read. So here all my old thoughts and my uncle's thoughts are written in a blue pen, and all my new thoughts are written in a black pen, and that's kind of what I like to do if I go on a reread. I just use a different pen. So those are basically all of the ways I annotate my novels. And genuinely, how I annotate my other stuff is pretty simple as well. Let's look at my non-fiction. I say pretty simple as if anything about that has been simple. I love annotating. Also, this hurts. For non-fiction, we have got a philosophy book, and this is the same way as I've annotated with my basic style, where I just use a pen to underline and bracket stuff. But the only exception for that I do with non-fiction books that I don't do with my fiction books is that I dog-ear the pages that I find important. So instead of tabbing, I don't really like to tab my non-fiction books. I just dog-ear the page, and I usually can find the part that I found the most important. And if I want to really mark it down that it's important, I again write down either a star or an exclamation mark to be like, this is it. This is the very important stuff. And sometimes I do the same thing where I literally just underline and or bracket, but I don't dog-ear, which is done with this philosophy book. There's really not much else to say about non-fiction. That's literally all I do. But sometimes I do tab my non-fiction books. And how I do that is literally the same way I tab my fiction books. But obviously the things I am looking for are different. So instead of like tapping characters and plot and whatever, for example with The Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England, I am marking down culture, violence/war, person as in individual, land, knowledge, people as in collective, and life in general. Also, one thing that I noticed some of my friends being concerned about is that they don't know what to write down in their non-fiction books unless it's like smart. So yeah, of course I might write down smart comments if it's something that wakes up something within me. But then I also write down similar comments that I write in my non-fiction books. And sometimes it literally just XD. You can write XD in non-fiction books as well. Here. So what you're saying is humor hasn't really changed at all. It can be really dumb. Like, you don't have to be smart in your fiction books. Obviously, if you borrow it, that depends on your person. I wouldn't mind borrowing this to people, but I don't really care if they find my comments dumb. But if you're borrowing it to other people, maybe then think of what kind of picture you want to give of yourself. I don't mind if people see me cursing in my non-fiction books, but if that is something that bothers you, obviously cut that down. Then we have got poetry. Again, really simple. We've basically gone through the way, but the difference with my poetry is there a difference? Well, no, not really. What I do with my poetry usually, if I annotate it, again, I can just like underline stuff or highlight stuff and write down what I think. But if it's a poem that I find like very impactful, then I dog-ear it. Like, usually my favorite poems in a poetry book can be found really easily because I've dog-eared them. If I find like favorite line, instead of just underlining it, I underline it and then I draw a heart next to it. So it's really easy to find. I'm sorry, I'm not the kind of person who goes into depths analyzing poetry, but you can do that. But there's not really tips to give you with annotating because it's just do what you do. Plays, Shakespeare. I've got two different methods. My method number one is not tabbing and just using my basic method of underlining and bracketing and writing down my stuff. Here I've also drawn stars next to important places. This is Romeo and Juliet. Then the other method is doing that, but also tapping. Wow. But what I've actually done with my Shakespeare that is different is that instead of tapping like different things I'm looking for, let's say character, world, etc. with different colors, I've actually tabbed different characters with different colors. So for example, red is Cassius. So let's say if I'm writing an essay on Julius Caesar and I need to find specific parts that I found notable about Caesar or Brutus or Cassius or etc., I can go just through their character annotations. That was not a coherent sentence, but it makes sense. And a quick note on what to do if you're reading a book from the library or borrowing it from someone. And I actually read all my comics from the library, but I also kind of like to annotate them. And what I do is after I'm done with the specific issue, I write my thoughts down on these notes. And then I write down what comic and what issue that was about. And I have a stack of these. All my notes on the entirety of Sandman, even though I own only one of them, can be found here, and all my ongoing thoughts about Hellblaze. And that's a really simple thing to do. You don't have to do anything else except pick up a note and write things down. But you can also do that about novels, like maybe after every chapter, or it doesn't even have to be like following any method. Sometimes literally I just pick up a note because I want to write down what I'm feeling at the minute. And those were all my methods of chaos. I've got like one thing, which is like, if you ask me what is my favorite annotated book, well, it might be Interview with the Vampire. The level to which I've annotated this is just brilliant. Another one is The Northern Lights, because I've read this not once, I've read this twice. It means a lot to me, but it also has my uncle's notes. It has the progression of my notes and whatever, but what came to mind also is The Three Musketeers. I've just used my basic method of just tapping and using a black pen, but I love this book and I love my annotations in here. They are very not intellectual. I'm opening it. It's like, God, I love the cardinal ... because Trevi is the best. D'Artagnan, you have a problem. This is utterly brilliant. Honestly, Aramis, you've misunderstood your calling. Those are the words of a poet. And that really sums up why I annotate. I annotate because I get something more from a book, because I get to interact with it, but also because all my silly thoughts, all my silly loves for the book, all my silly ideas and sillinesses are eternalized. They are made forever. I can always experience my first read of this book or any favorite book of mine that I've loved, because I wrote those things down that you might think are irrelevant or stupid. And yeah, sure they are. Who cares that I found Trevi to be the best in that scene? No one. But I can go through it, and if I reread this, I can always experience those thoughts anew, and I can return to that moment of reading it. And if I'm feeling rubbish, I can literally just pick this up from the shelf and browse through my favorite scenes. I can read those things I've marked down as I love, and that is the beauty of annotation. But also, I can go deep into the intellectual side of it and really dissect the book I'm reading. And someone might think that stopping every page to write down extensively about what you're reading ruins the reading experience. But that is why I am reading it, not why you're reading it. But those were all my thoughts about annotating. This took quite a bit longer than I was expecting, but doesn't everything with me? If someone watches this, I hope you found something worth hearing, worth listening, worth knowing, and you gained something, and maybe I helped you a bit on your journey to annotation or with annotation. Annotating? I don't know which word to use. When you really get into annotating, I don't think you can ever get out of annotating, if you know what I mean. And I bloody love annotating. I could never see a future in which I just read a book and didn't write down anything. Obviously, I sometimes read books with which I don't interact with, but to read solely without interacting with the text ever, To me, that wouldn't even really be reading at this point. Yeah, I need to get up and get out and get a coffee. I don't know how to end this video. So I'm not gonna buy it.